This is a problem involving uniform circular motion and also having to do with the critical case, where something barely happens or doesn't happen. So the setup of the problem is a cart goes around a loop-the-loop of radius r, and we want to know what is the minimum velocity it needs to have when at the top of the loop-loop in order to not fall off. You could imagine that if a cart were going too slowly, then when it gets up there, it would fall off. It wouldn't make it all the way around. And I think a relevant equation from uniform circular motion is that the amount of centripetal acceleration has to be equal to v squared over r, where v is the velocity of the thing in uniform circular motion and r is the radius of the circle that it makes. So here are a couple of free body diagrams that represent what happens when there is a lot of velocity. We're looking for the minimum velocity, but if there is a lot of velocity and the track doesn't break, so if the track doesn't break, it is in circular motion. And so if there's a large velocity, well, that requires a large acceleration to keep redirecting that velocity vector. In order to have a large acceleration that redirects a velocity vector around a circle, you need to have a large force acting in the centripetal direction, or a large net centripetal force. So if there's like a super big velocity, you could imagine that the cart presses into the track, and there's a large normal force in addition to the gravitational force. So there, the centripetal force is the gravitational force plus the normal force. And they together are the centripetal acting forces, or the centripetal acting combination of forces. That force, the combination of those two, is what keeps redirecting the velocity vector into a circular path. If there's less of a velocity, then it presses into the track less. There's less of a normal force. Less net centripetal force is required to keep it in uniform circular motion. Now let's think about the minimum velocity that we need. If we have the minimum velocity that will keep it going around in the circle, that's like saying that the gravitational force provides just enough centripetal force to keep it in uniform circular motion. You don't need a normal force when you have a little enough velocity, where it's barely leaving the track. Barely leaving the track means barely leaving contact with the surface of the track, barely losing the normal force altogether. So I think that this is a free body diagram of the cart when it has just enough velocity to go around. The only force acting on it is gravity down. You might wonder, what would the free body diagram look like if there were too little velocity? And it would probably look like this too after it was falling off. If there were too little velocity to go around, then the gravitation force vector would be so strong as to not just redirect the direction of the velocity vector, but also to change its magnitude. And that would correspond to the cart accelerating down off the track. This discussion and this series of diagrams is a little bit subtle, and it is more subtle than you probably need to know all of. Operationally, we will deal with critical case problems in the future, and what you need to know is that in the critical case, the normal force usually vanishes, and the only forces acting are the other forces. We saw that in the case of the monkey on the rope. There was no normal force between the package and the ground when the monkey was just barely lifting the package off the ground. So given that that is the free body diagram in this case, the acceleration is the combination of forces over the mass. There's only the gravitational force mg that's equal to v squared over r, because we're specifying that it be in uniform circular motion. The m's cancel. V is the square root of the radius times the local gravitational acceleration. And that's it. That's the answer. Do the units check? Let's see. The square root of meters times meters per second squared is meters per second. That is a velocity. So we're good. We did it.